The case of the Golden State Killer is one of the most shocking crime stories in American history. It lasted for over 40 years and involved terrible crimes, including murders, rapes, and burglaries. This case showed how advancements in DNA technology and determined law enforcement efforts finally brought justice to the victims and their families. The story of the Golden State Killer began in 1974 in Visalia, California. At first, the criminal was known as the Visalia Ransacker. He committed over 100 burglaries, but his crimes were unusual. Instead of stealing expensive items, he took small, personal belongings like photographs and keepsakes. This made his crimes more personal and terrifying for his victims. The ransacker would break into homes, leave the rooms in chaos, and carefully study his victims before attacking. His knowledge of their routines made him a very dangerous criminal. However, things became even worse in 1975 when he killed a man who tried to stop him. This murder marked a shift in his behavior from a burglar to a killer. Despite many efforts, the police could not catch him. He was smart, careful, and always managed to escape. Then, in late 1975, he disappeared. The town of Visalia was relieved, but they did not know that he had only moved on to a more dangerous phase of his crimes. After leaving Visalia, the criminal moved to Sacramento and became known as the East Area Rapist. His crimes escalated, and he began targeting couples in their homes. His method was terrifying. He would break in late at night, wake up his victims, and shine a flashlight in their eyes. He tied up the men and then assaulted the women. To keep the men from moving, he placed dishes on their backs and threatened to kill them if they made a sound. These attacks caused widespread fear. People changed their daily habits, bought guard dogs, and installed new locks, but the rapist continued to strike. He was always one step ahead of the police. Sometimes, he even called his victims after the attacks, whispering threats like, "I'll be back." By 1979, the attacks in Sacramento stopped, but the criminal was not finished. He moved again and became even more violent. In 1979, the attacks turned deadly. Now called the original Night Stalker, the criminal began murdering his victims. He used the same method, breaking in at night, tying up the victims, and attacking them. But now, he made sure there were no witnesses by killing them. Some of the most famous cases included the murders of Lyman and Charlene Smith in 1980 and Keith and Patrice Harrington in the same year. The police struggled to connect the cases because the crimes happened in different cities. At the time, there were no shared databases, making it harder to track criminals across multiple locations. By 1986, the attacks suddenly stopped. No one knew why. People wondered if the killer had died, gone to prison for another crime, or simply decided to stop. The case remained unsolved for decades, leaving victims' families with no answers. For years, investigators continued searching for the Golden State Killer, but they had no leads. Then, in 2001, forensic science made an important discovery. DNA testing confirmed that the Visalia Ransacker, the East Area Rapist, and the original Night Stalker were the same person. This was a major breakthrough because it united all these crimes under one identity, the Golden State Killer. However, there was still a big problem. The DNA from the crime scenes did not match any profiles in criminal databases. This meant that the killer had never been arrested for a crime where his DNA was taken. Investigators needed another way to find him. In 2018, law enforcement used a new technique, genetic genealogy. This involved using public DNA databases where people uploaded their DNA to find family members. Investigators uploaded the Golden State Killer's DNA and found distant relatives. By building a family tree, they narrowed it down to one suspect, Joseph James DeAngelo. DeAngelo was a former police officer, which explained why he had been able to avoid capture for so long. Investigators followed him and secretly collected a DNA sample from an object he discarded. The results confirmed it, DeAngelo was the Golden State Killer. On April 24, 2018, police arrested DeAngelo at his home in Citrus Heights, California. His neighbors were shocked because they saw him as an ordinary old man. But behind this normal life, he had committed some of the worst crimes in California's history. In June 2020, DeAngelo confessed to his crimes as part of a plea deal to avoid the death penalty. He admitted to 13 murders, 50 rapes, and over 100 burglaries. He was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. The sentencing was emotional for the victims and their families. Many attended the hearing to share how DeAngelo's crimes had affected their lives. They finally saw justice served, even though it had taken over 40 years. The Golden State Killer case changed criminal investigations in several ways. 1. DNA technology. This case proved that DNA evidence could solve crimes even after decades. Without genetic genealogy, DeAngelo might never have been caught. 2. Law enforcement collaboration. The case showed the importance of police departments working together. Today, shared databases help track criminals across different cities and states. 3. Justice for cold cases. After this case, many other unsolved crimes were reopened using DNA technology, giving hope to victims' families. Some people argue that because DeAngelo was caught so late in life, justice was delayed. He lived a free life for decades while his victims suffered. However, his arrest and conviction still brought closure. His victims and their families finally knew that he was behind bars and could never harm anyone again. This case showed that no matter how much time passes, criminals can still be caught. It proved that justice can be served even after decades. It also highlighted the strength of the victims and their families, who never gave up hope. The use of genetic genealogy has since been used to solve many other cold cases. This case set a new standard for how old crimes can be solved with modern technology. The Golden State Killer case is one of the most important criminal cases in history. It spanned over 40 years, involved terrible crimes, and took decades to solve. In the end, advancements in DNA technology, determined investigators, and the resilience of victims helped bring justice. This case serves as a reminder that justice may be delayed, but it is never denied. The capture of Joseph James DeAngelo not only gave closure to the victims and their families but also changed the future of criminal investigations. It proved that science, persistence, and dedication could uncover the truth, no matter how long it takes.